Welcome to this episode of The Wolf and the Shepherd. Today we are going to talk about the rise of Karen. I have a cousin actually who's named Karen, and just thinking about women nowadays that were named Karen and the connotation now that comes behind the name Karen, I gotta say this episode is dedicated to any woman out there named Karen.
I chose this title, The Rise of Karen, basically because of the rise of Skywalker, and I thought this would suck less than that movie.
Well, that's really not setting the bar all that high, though.
It's not, is it? But also, when I thought of that, I thought back to Star Wars Episode 7. And, you know, when she gets all that stuff out of that crashed
the
Imperial... the Imperial, fight.
She was in the Star Destroyer.
When she's
scavenging around.
And she's scavenging all that stuff, and she goes up to the counter, and the dude says, "What you've bought me today is worth 1 credit." For a moment there, I thought she was going to ask to speak to the manager.
See, that would have been great. Because, you can take that two ways. I always looked at that scene as that guy must have been the descendant of the owner of GameStop.
Right, yeah.
And because it's kind of the same thing. I brought you 500 games. That's worth $6.
Yeah. I saw a meme, I don't know, maybe beginning of the year, and it said that there's an estimated $1.3 trillion of non-used technology in people's homes.
Oh,
and then it had GameStop values at it $12.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's kind of funny we decided today to talk about Karens because, like I said, I have a cousin named Karen. I got a good friend of mine. His wife's named Karen. My brother-in-law, by the way, did not even know about what a quote-unquote Karen was until about a month ago, and I had to explain it to him, and so I want to share that story with you. So we went to a vacation spot, and him and I were going to check in for our families, and there was a couple in front of us, and this poor little girl behind the counter was trying to get them checked in, and this woman was just complaining about the charges for this and the charges for that, and we prepaid for this, and we shouldn't have to do this, and we shouldn't have to do that. And I kid you not, the guy turned around and said, "Karen, let me handle this," and turned around and finished the transaction. Took everything out of me. Took absolutely everything out of me not to laugh when he said, "Karen, let me handle this." So they wander off. We go up there to check in, and I told the girl behind the counter, I was like, not only was she a Karen, but her name was actually Karen. I don't know if you heard that or not. And the girl behind the counter said, "Oh, I didn't know that her name was really Karen, but yeah, she's definitely a Karen." My brother-in-law looks at me and says, "Karen? What do you mean? What's a Karen?" And I thought, you got to be kidding me. How have you missed this for so long? How did you not know what a Karen is? So where did this Karen term originate? What's going on with that?
Well, I've only actually known one Karen in my life, and it was a girl I was in primary school or elementary school over here.
When you say you knew a Karen, you mean a person actually
an actual person
named
Karen.
Okay.
Yeah, her name was Karen Sneesby, and I was in love with her from about age 6 to about age 15. Never told her. Actually, no, I did actually tell her on Facebook when she was about 35. But, by then it was a little bit too late because then I lived in America and she was still living in England. But, the name Karen actually comes from the Danish originated name Catherine.
Catherine. Really?
Yeah, Catherine. So I don't know. And that's something I always kind of figure out. How do you kind of deviate this name from this name? You go like from Catherine, let's go with Karen. So I don't know quite how they kind of pulled that one out, but yeah, apparently that's the earliest recorded name of the earliest name of Karen came from
that's
Catherine.
kind of ironic, to be honest with you, because in the meme culture we're in today, or in the pop culture, whatever, the first kind of stereotypical Karen, as we call them, was actually that chick from that John and Kate Plus 8. You know, the blonde hair, the short bob haircut, has that attitude, kind of entitled, just that, thinks the world revolves around her, all that good stuff. So it's kind of ironic that the name Karen actually came from Catherine, and the John and Kate Plus 8 lady actually was kind of that quintessential first Karen there.
Well, I mean, 2 years ago, if somebody had said you're being a Karen or this Karen, you wouldn't have said anything about it or even recognized it. I mean, it's definitely a last year and a half. And I mean, I certainly think, during the COVID-19 thing, that, the no mask wearing Karens or the please put on a mask Karens have really certainly come up. And, the media's highlighted it. And I think it's because there's been a lack of stuff to report upon. And so
the old slow news day.
Yeah. And so, the name Karen has become synonymous with, a white, middle-class, non-working female who wants to complain about something, always wants to complain about something. Now, obviously, those people have always existed, but it took, a worldwide pandemic to have somebody put a label to it.
Sure. And it always takes something like that. So, talking about, the Karens or the Catherines, I mean, what would you consider one of the most famous ones, maybe from history? Not within the past, 5 or 10 years, something like that. I mean, let's dig up some kind of a historical Karen. Can you think of one?
Yeah, I think history tends to dispose of characters who don't exactly overperform. So Catherine the moron and Catherine the stupid kind of slipped by the wayside. Kind of
right.
History forgot them. But
what about Catherine the ginger?
Well, we don't want to go there again.
Okay.
But Catherine the Great was a historical figure. I'm not sure why, but when somebody mentioned her name to me a few years ago, I remembered the name. I couldn't remember what she was synonymous for, and so I looked her up on Google, and I don't know if this is a myth or not, but she died because she was too fond of her horse.
Ooh.
She kissed her horse a lot, and
too fond.
Yeah,
and
things
horse.
went too far, and she died a few days later. And that's what Catherine the Great is known for, according to the internet. Now, that might be an entire lie, but I've got no reason to doubt the internet.
Yeah, everything on the internet's true.
That's the only Catherine in history I can think of, other than was it Catherine Oxenberg, who was in like Dynasty or something, who I had a crush on, or was it Dallas or whatever? Anyway, I had a crush on her. That's the only other Catherine I know.
You're losing.
Ago.
Yeah, you're losing me on that one.
That's the only Catherine in history worth mentioning, other than Catherine the Great, I think.
So the funny thing to me is how this Karen thing has taken such a hold. Like I said, the beginning of this, I really feel for the nice women out there that are named Karen.
Do you know any?
So I really feel bad for the nice women out there named Karen,
right.
Wherever disposed you may be, because there's so many women who are not named Karen that have grabbed this connotation, kind of sullied your name. So I kind of feel for you there. But there's just countless examples out there of the Karen-like behavior, and I don't think, especially in the United States, there probably isn't a single individual, man or woman or whatever gender you choose to be, that hasn't witnessed firsthand Karen activity. And I'm not talking about just seeing a meme on the internet or seeing a video. I mean firsthand, live, like actually seeing, a woman berate some poor, minimum wage employee at a restaurant because of something, or somebody, did something wrong, or they have an expired coupon, or they don't have the receipt for a return at Target, and they always want to speak to the manager. I've seen it myself. I know you've seen it yourself. There is probably not a soul listening right now that hasn't seen something like that.
Yeah, I think this is one of those bizarre moments in history where everybody right back to the 1950s onwards probably saw this type of character and never had a label to put upon them.
Right.
And, it's really, again, like I said, during this last 6 months, 12 months, that this label of Karen has been put upon them, because we all know this type of personality. As you know, I coached soccer for almost 20 years here in North Texas.
Yep.
And I came across this personality so many times that I could have had $1 for every time. I wouldn't be sitting here doing this podcast.
Listen, part of that whole Karen is that soccer mom, which is now like a cheer mom, a whatever mom. So, I mean, for crying out loud, you had to see it with all of the kids you coached over the years, seeing that soccer mom, which kind of, that used to be the term, right? The soccer mom. They had the minivan, they were entitled, they were the stay-at-home mom that did all this, and that soccer mom has now turned into Karen.
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit of a differentiation because, the original soccer moms were, I think, just defined as a suburban, non-working, middle-class mom who had kids in athletics, and her main duties were picking up the kids, taking them to, the extracurricular activities, taking them back, putting something in the microwave because she couldn't cook. And that was it. But I think the Karen version, and there's certainly, like I said, having, coached soccer for 20 years in North Texas, a differentiation between that soccer mom and the Karen soccer mom. Because the Karen soccer mom is that individual who was always terrible at athletics. Probably first prime responsibility was hall monitor. She married, kind of out of her league a little bit. She married somebody who earned a lot of money, which afforded her to be able to stay home. She got a can't be bothered haircut, which is the bob, which we used to call it in England, the can't be bothered. Can't be bothered haircut.
Because it's can't be bothered
haircut. I don't want to care for it anymore. I don't want to have long hair. I can't be bothered about being attractive. It was called a can't be bothered haircut.
Right. And not to go off on too much of a tangent, but there is something to be said about a lot of women that do decide, they have the long hair that they keep up. They curl it. They do whatever they do to their hair, right? They're going to the haircut place all the time. And then they get married, and then something happens when they've been married for a little bit of time. Maybe it's they popped a kid or two out, or maybe they've just gotten complacent and lazy, and next thing you know, off comes the hair.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quick, fast, and in a hurry. Just all of a sudden, it's like I've reached a certain, either an age or a certain point in my marriage, and now I just want to chop off my hair.
Well,
I've never.
I think there's a lot to be said in terms of personality of a woman who chooses to have a haircut of 9 months post chemotherapy. I mean, I just think it's like, we all want, the least, amount of resistance to everyday life. I mean, hey, I shave my hair, so I wash my face and I keep going, and that's me done. So, I don't have any hair on my head, shave it off and stuff. But, I don't know if I can't remember what psalm it is, but it says, a woman's hair is a beauty.
Right.
But I think that's true to a point. And, we know it's, a lot of upkeep, but we appreciate that as men, even though we moan about it as men. You know, it's like, oh, she takes so long to get ready, but when she comes out and she looks fantastic and she looks beautiful, we appreciate the end result. But it's those women who like, forget it, not going to bother with it.
Yep.
You know, and it's that where that, again, I think that Karen Bob came from, or again, in the England thing, can't be bothered thing. But, you know, they get bothered about such trivial issues. And again, in the soccer world, I mean, even in like, you know, under 6 or under 7, you know, kids soccer, you know, they would get up and they would shout at the referees. They would cuss at the referees. And it's like, this is under 7's soccer. You're cussing out this 15-year-old kid out there.
Yeah, the ref.
For what reason? 15. For what reason? What are you going to get with this? You know, your kid's on the field there cringing. All the other parents on the sideline are cringing. And you do this week in, week out. And you have to think, oh, what kind of deficit in their life leads to that behavior?
And then does that behavior then get inherited? You know, you
think there's a Karen gene?
I think there could be. I think it could be learned behavior as well. I mean, you've had that kind of mentality, activity, whatever, especially with kids' sports for years. And, you know, I mean, I remember played sports as a kid, and, you know, I didn't have parents that acted like Karens on the sideline, but I definitely had teammates that had parents that acted like that. And I kind of think that maybe they ended up, you know, having their kids, right? And maybe they're acting that same way on the sideline as well. And now that we're in this just constantly complaining society, and whoever can scream the loudest tends to win the argument, that's some of where this comes from.
Now, at what age do you think certain women become Karens? Because I can't remember that type of stereotypical behavior like in high school or college. I think it kind of hits after 30.
I was going to say it's got to be 30 plus.
Yeah.
I think there's something, if there's a 2 in front of their age that can't quite be a Karen.
Right.
They're still, whether they could have got married, let's say at 17 or 18, right? But something about being in their 20s, they don't quite have that Karen attitude.
It's actually hard in your 20s to find enough reasons to lose the will to live. Whereas when you get in your 30s, I think that's when that kind of stuff kicks in.
That could be, you know, the old joke about the men in the midlife crisis or whatever. I mean, maybe the Karenism is now the women's midlife crisis.
Yeah.
You know, that, like you say, the cutting of the hair, and then they're just kind of giving up on certain things and just wanting to moan and complain about everything. Could be that version of the guy buying the yellow Porsche and driving around, you know, with receding hairline and a beer gut. Could be the same thing.
Yeah. Now, do you think Karens fit the environment or search out avenues where they can be most effectively Karen, as in such? And I'm thinking of like women actually having kids just so they can join the PTA.
Oh, 100% that happens. I believe that there are women that have a checklist that says, okay, everyone that I either are friends with or grew up with have done certain things in their life. By a certain age, they've graduated high school. Then by a certain age, they've graduated college. Then by a certain age, they've gotten married. And by a certain age, they've had kids. And if I somehow don't get close to this checklist, I'm a failure. And I'm afraid that they're going to talk behind my back and not invite me to girls' night out and do all of that. So that totally exists. And I challenge you to say it doesn't, because I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
That totally exists. So then they check all these boxes off, like check. And, you know, graduated high school, graduated college, if that's your thing. I got married, I had kids. Maybe I have a divorce, maybe I don't. That part doesn't matter. But now I've hit all these check marks, right?
Yeah.
And now because I've hit all these check marks on my list, you've got to listen to me.
Right.
Because I've done all the requirements to be a fulfilled, successful adult, and I know more than you.
Yeah.
And so that entitlement kicks in. I'm going to cut my hair off, and by God, if you do not honor this expired coupon that I have, I'm going to speak to your manager.
Yeah. And I watched, I was trying to look up some videos of Karens on YouTube, and there were,
well,
I think maybe 250,000.
Yeah, if you were going to do that, then we would have
that.
to probably put this podcast off for about 2.5 years because
yeah.
I wouldn't see it for 2.5 years.
It would be a 72-hour event. But there was one in Toys R Us, and I think this was in Arkansas, and this woman was at the counter, and she was screaming at the clerk, and she was picking up cuddly toys and just throwing them at the clerk. And I kind of think, what could annoy you in Toys R Us so much that you get to the checkout counter? I mean, like, it may be a coupon, you know, if your 10% off didn't work or whatever, and you get a little bit annoyed, blah, blah, blah. But I just didn't understand, because, I mean, she literally went on a rampage. She was picking up candy, she was picking up cuddly toys, throwing that at the clerk, and she was cussing and all that stuff. Now, you know, I get when, you know, Popeye's Chicken had the spicy chicken burger thing and they kept running out, and you saw all these videos of people online where, like, people were going crazy. I can get that, because if I'd have actually gone to Popeye's, I mean, like, really wanting a spicy chicken burger and they didn't have any, I can understand wrecking the Popeye's joint. But in Toys R Us...
Well, okay, now hang on. You can understand wrecking the Popeyes joint.
Yeah.
Right? But would you
Have you ever had a Popeyes spicy chicken burger?
No.
Then you don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
Continue.
Go on. Well, yeah, I just couldn't conceive of how much anger could come from something, like I said, even if you had an expired coupon, which would result in that behavior if you were a normal, non-Florida, on meth type person, to actually exhibit that behavior of just like throwing stuff around and doing that. I just don't get.
Could it be upbringing, though? And the reason that I think about it this way, which has nothing to do with it, Karen, but I remember my dad calling me one day. I had gotten married, left the house. We had our first kid on the way. My phone rings. My dad was calling me.
Was this within a week of you leaving the house?
No, it was probably like 10 days.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I answered the phone, and my dad said, I need to call and talk to you about something, because there's something I've seen that I've never seen before. And I said, well, what's that, Dad? And he said, well, do you know what timeout is? And I said, what are you talking about? Like sports or kids or what? He's like, no, kids. This is a punishment. Now, it's called timeout. And I said, well, yeah, I know what timeout is. He said, I didn't know what timeout was. And I was at the store, and of course, the store for my dad meant any place you could buy something. Yeah. So no clue what store it was. I was at the store, and there was a kid misbehaving, and he was just smacking things off the rack and knocking things down, and his dad was there, and he said, Johnny, you know, if you don't stop, I'm going to put you in timeout. And little Johnny just kept doing it. Little Johnny just kept doing it. He said, Johnny, if you don't stop, I'm going to put you in timeout. And he just kept doing it. And he said, I'm going to count to 3. And if you don't stop doing this, you're going to be in timeout. 1, 2, 3. Okay, Johnny, timeout. He said, then he grabbed the kid and they walked off.
Yeah.
My dad's witnessing this, and he says, I have to see this. I have to see what timeout is.
Yeah.
So my dad follows them, turns around, and he said, so do you know what timeout is? I said, well, I'm sure he probably sat him down, like, you know, found a corner or something. It's in a store. Most people at their house, they have like a timeout corner or something. He said, well, no, that's not what happened. He was hugging him, saying that you should make better decisions.
Right.
I said, oh, okay, so that was his definition of timeout.
Right.
Now, if that would have been a little girl, you could then translate that into the fact of This is why some woman went into a Toys R Us because she didn't get her way off her coupon and decided to just start throwing stuff at people. Now, do you think,
like, I mean, when you and I were growing up, you know, time out was like, all right, you're not doing crap in the living room, now go and not do crap in your bedroom. So it wasn't really much of a downscale, you know. It's like, just go from this place to this place. Now it's like, oh, time out, go play computer games in your bedroom for an hour. It's like, okay.
Right. Well, and you know, I didn't grow up with time out. You know, mine was take everything away from me. You know, if I did something wrong.
But what did you have? But the point is, what did you have though at that point in time?
Well, sure.
You think about the 80s or 90s. I mean, what did you have?
There wasn't much. There wasn't much to take away from me anyway. But that little bit that I had, I definitely wanted to hold on to.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So. I can, circling back to the Karen thing, I can see why then, you know, because of that entitlement, which, and that's the word I keep circling back to is that entitlement that you need to listen to me. I've checked off all of those check marks on my little checklist and I've accomplished all this. So I want my participation trophy. I want everybody to listen to me because I've earned something. I've earned the right to do this.
Yeah.
That's what's going on.
Yeah, and absolutely every definition of a Karen I came across online when I was searching used the word narcissism or narcissistic.
Oh, sure.
And obviously that's not an isolated label that, you know, has been applied to people over the last year or whatever. I mean, you know, that's an ongoing thing, but like I said, I think this is one of these unique models in history where it took so long to put a label, and I don't know what label you could have put upon these people without achieving a kind of almost non-offensive label like a Karen. I mean, again, we feel sorry for all the Karens out there who are nice people.
So here's some irony, though. And I read this article. I haven't fact checked this or researched it, but there is an article out there. Hopefully we'll dig it up and share it later. That there is a Karen out there. I don't know if her name is really Karen or not. That wants people to stop calling women who exhibit Karen behavior Karens, and they want to call it the K word rather than Karen, because they have deemed it that offensive.
Yeah.
So we're getting the word Karen up there with like a racial or ethnic slur now, and it's a name. Well, so how would you feel? How would you feel if your name is Karen and now somebody out there is saying you can't even say that word, it's the K word, and you're just some lady named Karen.
Yeah.
What are you supposed to do?
Well, I mean, I think it goes back, you know, a couple of podcasts ago when we did the midgets one, where the little people of America, you know, wanted to define the midget name as the M word.
The term midget
and our reaction to that was piss off. I think our same reaction to people wanting us to call it the K word is going to be piss off.
Right.
But I think Karens find their home, like I said, originally, you know, when they had kids, they'll find, you know, the Parent Teachers Association. But, you know, I think sometimes Karens develop later on in life. Like at 30, they might be pretty normal, but at 35, they turn into a Karen.
Right.
And so
35 is probably a safe age.
And so they find the homeowners associations. If they're in a place where there's a homeowners association, they sign up for that stuff immediately.
Right. Well, you've got the HOA and the PTA, right?
Right.
That's the home for Karens.
Yeah.
There's a group of crows is called a murder, and you know, a group of dogs is called a herd or a pack or whatever. They've always said a group of Karens is called a homeowners association.
Now, sorry to interrupt you here. Do you think PTA meetings and home associations meetings, they don't bother taking the first name, they just take the last name because they automatically assume the first name is Karen? Or
Oh, probably so. If you got 10 women attending a PTA meeting, you got to say
at least nine of them are going to be called Karen.
I was going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say 8, but you're being more of a realist.
Yeah,
there.
11 out of 10 of them have got to be called Karen.
There you go.
Yeah. So, the HOAs, I mean, that is, I thought, because I lived briefly in an area about 8 years ago which had a homeowners association, and they would come round twice a week, and we would see the car drive at like 4 miles per hour. It's like a pedophile outside of an elementary school.
Sure.
And it would drive by, and it was just, there'd be one person driving and the other person would be out the passenger window taking photos.
Sure.
And what they were looking for down our neighborhood was the height of the bushes, not the height of the grass, because it was difficult when you're doing a drive-by to tell the height of the grass, but they were looking for the height of the bushes. Now, mine and yours, good friend Eric, who lived round the corner from us, if you remember, there was one evening we went to visit him, and he had that one bush outside his house which was cut into a cube, which had like, I don't know, one branch, and it looked terrible. But he didn't have a homeowners association down his thing, because remember, he had no soil in his yard.
Right.
He had one bush outside his front door, which looked absolutely terrible. But my street was adjoining his street, and we had people literally driving down there 2 times a day taking photos, and we would get letters in the mail, not mailed, but actually put in the letterbox by hand. Your bushes have not been trimmed to so much height. It's going to be a $15 a month fine if you don't sort this out. And, we looked into the metrics of it, and if we paid somebody $15 a week to keep on top of this, that'd be like, okay, that's $60 a month. Yeah, we'll just pay the $15 fine.
Sure.
Yeah.
I had a friend who lived in a homeowners association, and he had decided he was, kind of maybe the male version of a Karen, but the silent version of a male version of a Karen. And so he grew up not around homeowners associations, grew up in South Texas, grew up basically on kind of a ranch, and then moved up to the DFW Metroplex and got married and moved into a house in a homeowners association. And so he decided to read the covenant of the homeowners association. And this one's a little bit different than the one of yours where you talk about them just dropping off the letters. This homeowners association actually mailed the letters. So what he decided was he was paying, I think he said $240 a year to the homeowners association. So he said he was going to get his money back in fines because the way the homeowners association covenant read, they would send a letter out to your house for you to correct it, and then you could request another letter saying that you corrected the action. So he would purposefully do little things like leave his trash cans out for an extra day,
right,
or let something grow up. So he would get the letters. He said, I'm going to get them 30 whatever cents a time a week. And he got very close. I think within that year, he got them to spend about $190 in postage, sending him letters, just trying to get away from that. My other favorite story with homeowner associations, I lived in one. In fact, I'm in one right now, but the one prior, I had a tree that died in my yard. So I get a letter from the homeowner association that says, you must remove the dead tree from your yard. So, all right, went out there, knocked it over, thought everything was good. But
what do you mean you knocked it over? Wait,
it was
punched it or headbutted it or what?
Well, it wasn't any bigger around than like a Coke can. I mean, it was a little twig of a tree, right? This isn't a big tree, right? So I just pushed it over and got it hauled off,
effortlessly.
Right? Yeah, exactly. You just barely had to touch it; it fell over. So then I get another letter from the HOA saying, "Well, I've got to replace that tree." And I thought, well, you sent me a letter saying I got to remove the dead tree. Now the dead tree's gone. Now I got to put another tree up.
Was it specific about what you had to replace it with?
Oh, It was,
Okay.
but not yet. You're getting a little ahead of yourself.
Right.
So in the covenant, it talked about the kind of tree that you had to put in there.
Oh.
So what I decided to do was, well, in the letter it said I had to replace the tree. So I found a fake ficus tree and I planted that in my front yard, knowing there's no way for it to die because
Right.
it's a fake tree.
Yeah.
I eventually got a letter on that saying that I had to
Oh my
get
goodness.
rid of that tree
Right,
because
yeah.
I didn't have the proper species of tree in my
wow.
front yard. And so I left that tree there for a little bit and then we moved out shortly after
my
that.
Word. Now, if you had to guess, how many homeowners associations do you think there are in the United States?
Oh, wow.
If you had to
I mean,
guess.
that is impossible to even fathom
Yeah.
a guess. I don't know.
351,000.
Wow.
And that
Three.
actually,
Well,
Yeah.
let's think about that for a second. 351,000 HOAs in
Yeah.
the United States.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
and it actually covers 53% of all homeowners in the United States. So over half of the homeowners in the United States are covered by homeowner associations.
So by that thinking, right? You have your federal government, you have your state government, you have your local government,
and then you have
and
Karens.
then you have the Karen government.
Yeah,
So
Karen
you have
government.
4 governments essentially that you're having
Yeah.
to submit to if you're, and if you're an American citizen that's a homeowner, you got a 1 in 2 chance basically of belonging to one of these.
Right, yeah.
So now you have all these other
Yeah.
crazy laws
Yeah.
that you're going to have to submit to in an HOA.
Yeah.
And the sad part is, a lot of times when you go to look to buy a house, they're mandatory HOAs.
Yeah.
This isn't something you can opt out of.
Yeah.
If you want to live in this neighborhood, not only do you have to belong to it, you have to pay dues
Yeah,
to it.
yeah.
And if you don't pay your dues, guess what? They can put a lien on your house.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Absolutely. But, people complain about living in the hood, but there are no HOAs or Karens in the hood because if she turns up, she's going to get shanked.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think
You're
that's a-
probably going to have that sniper come by that can find the midgets
Right,
out there
yeah,
and
yeah.
go ahead and knock her off.
Now, again, online, because this is such a new phenomena, the whole Karen thing, and I'm very interested over the next few years how it's going to evolve, how they actually, because you can guarantee there's nobody in the next, decade going to be naming their kids Karen.
That would be an interesting article to research, Ben, because you and I never fact check anything. I wonder over the past several years. I mean, parents naming their daughter Karen, that has got to have traipsed off to almost nothing by now.
Well, I mean, I read an article actually in the New York Times, and in 1965 it was the 3rd most popular name. Karen.
Okay, so
1965.
kids
So that
born
was
in
like-
1965.
So people around the age of 55 now,
right.
right?
Okay.
Karen was the 3rd most popular name. In 2018, and remember this was before the Karen tidal wave,
Right.
it fell to 635th.
Hmm.
And the article in the New York Times was actually entitled, "How Did Karens Fall So Far?" And remember, this was in 2018, right? So
Right.
this was before the Karen crescendo of...
Well, yeah, I think, and don't get me to lying, but that's probably getting close to the beginning of starting to call the soccer moms Karens. But it wasn't popular. It might have been a sub-thread on Reddit, something like that, but it wasn't in everyday speak.
Yeah.
Your non-internet focused people probably were not using it. They
Yeah.
weren't saying "Okay, Karen" when somebody complained to the manager. They weren't worried about 4 women coming into Chili's with bob haircuts, knowing that poor waitress is just not going to get a tip, and they're all 4 going to complain about their chicken salads that they got and how they put the wrong dressing or too much dressing or not enough dressing or they didn't fill their iced tea cup up fast enough.
Yeah. Now, I've actually got a relative named Karen Abbott, who lives in England, and I think she's about 48. And every time I post a meme on my Facebook, I have to send her a message to apologize for it. But like I said, outside of her, other than the Karen Sneeze Me girl I knew, in elementary school, who I had an eternal crush on, and maybe still to this day, I've not really known any Karens. So, if the Karen name goes out of the equation, I'm not necessarily sure it's going to be missed. Now, in England, we had a similar thing in the mid-90s with the name Sharon and Tracy. Okay. Sharon and Tracy became synonymous with very lower class women of questionable morals. And so, although it was a very popular name right from the 1970s up to the mid-90s, the name dropped off and almost nobody from that point called their kids Sharon or Tracy.
Right.
Now, do you think the same thing, although again, I've said I don't know that many Karens, do you think Karen will be like a almost no, like nobody will ever name their kid Karen from this point forward?
Oh, I absolutely think so. In the United States, kind of along those same lines, there were some names out there. One that comes to mind is Crystal. Everybody stopped calling their kids Crystal.
Or Bambi.
Those were popular names, and those just kind of escaped.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look back in the history of Germany, back in the 40s, I mean, Adolf was a popular name. Nobody names their kid Adolf anymore. Kind of that similar stuff. I do not picture anybody wanting to name their kid Karen.
Yeah. Now, do you think that, like, you were naming you said Crystal. Do you think if you had a daughter and you named her Bambi, you would be shocked if she didn't become a professor of mathematics?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, either that or a neurosurgeon or something like that.
I think she's going to be dancing somewhere.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And not at the New York School of Ballet.
Yeah.
If you catch my drift.
And she's going to bring home small bills rather than like direct deposit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they should have some white substances probably all over those small bills.
Yeah. I wanted to actually bring up a few examples of real life Karens from real life sufferers, relatives and spouses of Karens, I found on the internet. Like I said, it's not an exact science because it seems so new, but there are a lot of I guess support groups which have come up on Reddit, the social media platform.
Support groups for spouses of
people,
Karens.
No, for people related to Karens, married to Karens.
Not just married.
No,
but,
it's a support group for people who are married or related or know Karens or work with Karens. And
gotcha.
So it's, like I said, it just amazes me it took this long to actually come up with a name to actually define this personality, which probably we've known has existed for decades and decades. But now we've identified it, we can sell the cure for it.
Sure.
But, I read some of the stories, and one of the first ones I read, and I actually read this one twice on 3 links, and this lady said, "My sister is a Karen in recovery. We had to have a Karen intervention with her a few months ago."
A Karenvention?
A Karen intervention.
I know, but let's call it a Karenvention. Karenvention?
Maybe KI?
That's part of the Queen's
KI?
English, right?
KI.
A KI. There we go.
All right, KI. That's official now. If anybody wants to use that term,
Trademark.
send us $8 every time you use it. Anyway. So anyway, she had a KI with her a few months ago, pointed out that 1 in every 3 restaurant visits resulted in food being sent back or asking to speak to a manager.
So I don't doubt that. I am the antithesis of that, and my wife, who, by the way, is not a Karen by any means, but she does get a little Karenish at restaurants because a restaurant can bring me the wrong food
Yeah.
They can bring food with the wrong stuff on it. I will still eat it. I won't send it back.
Right.
I mean, servers are just out there making a living. The kitchen, they're trying to make a living. If I look down at it and I say, yeah, I'll eat that, I'll eat it. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, if you bring her out a salad at the beginning of the meal and there's too much salad dressing on the salad, rather than scrape a little bit of it off, she'll send it back. So I totally get that one. Totally get that one.
Yeah. And there was one I read which, instead of me finding it funny, I actually, it kind of caught me in one of those midterm things of, I actually felt quite sympathetic.
So it went from kind of a funny to sad.
I actually felt quite sympathetic about this one. And it said, my brother was married to a Karen. She lived to berate people and rarely went anywhere without a flask of vodka to fuel her fire, which, well, I don't know. Sometimes you need that. But it said, in her first year of marriage, she decided her husband had to earn sex.
Ooh.
After a few years, he divorced her, and she still can't understand, in quotes, why he left her perfect ass.
I think even
narcissism 101.
Well, that is narcissism, of course, but in the same vein, you talk about the couldn't go anywhere with a flask of vodka.
Yeah.
Let's also not forget about that stereotypical fact of the Karen that always talks about wine. They're always, they've got to have their glass of wine. They
always post the memes about wine.
And wine makes me happy, or mommy needs wine, something like that.
Yeah.
And they usually take a picture of themselves with a glass of wine, and what's hanging behind them in their house? Live, laugh, and love. I'm surprised that tattoo shops do not give those tattoos for free to Karens, because they're going to complain about the size of the font or the way that it's tattooed to them. But that's their mantra. That's what they live by.
Don't you just love that hashtag blessed?
That's more of a southern thing, but it's kind of the same thing. Yeah.
But every other post is complaining about something. And
absolutely.
Hashtag blessed.
Yes, I'm blessed. I'm blessed.
Blessed.
Mama needs wine. Live, laugh, love.
Yeah.
Let's do all that.
Yeah.
Any other interesting Karen stories?
Yeah, I mean, again, there was one which came up a whole bunch of times, and I don't know who this lady is. I think she was from like North Carolina. And she said, my aunt is a Karen. The number of times I have heard the squeaky wheel gets the grease makes me cringe.
Oh, yeah. It's always that presupposition that they have to get out there and they have to tell everybody this is the way things needs to be done. That this is my opinion, and my opinion is fact. And you better listen to me, because once again, I've checked all those check boxes off on my list. I am Karen, hear me roar.
Yeah. Now, I'm actually, over the last 6 months, despite the negative impact of COVID-19, I'm actually really glad, like I said, we've actually come up with a word and a definition for this type of character, because we went decades, maybe like almost a century, of a non-identifiable term for women who act in this certain manner, and now we have a word for it. So yeah, I'm sorry for the people named Karen who are wonderful people.
All three of you out there.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's going to name their kid Karen from now on. So I mean, that's absolutely fine. But no, I'm actually happy we now have a word for that type of behavior. And I think almost if you kind of measure it out with COVID-19, I think it's a kind of equal.
Absolutely. That word is going to carry forward. We're going to be able to use that for quite a while.
Yeah.
I can't imagine a replacement for it. I'm not saying there won't be. Who knows what's going to happen in a year or two. There might be a different word for it. But
I'll tell you what, sorry to interrupt. If I get another dog and it's a female, I am definitely calling it Karen, because I want to shout when it's at the dog park and it's running away from me, I want to shout, Karen! Karen! Come here! Karen!
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And with that, thanks for tuning into this episode of The Wolf and the Shepherd. We'll catch you next time.